Update, brought to you by Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com or call 690 300. Manx Radio's Update with Andy Wint.
Faster my good evening, it's 5:30. This is Update for Hopjane, Tuesday 31st of October 2023 from Manx Radio. 30 minutes to look at the latest news on the Isle of Man. We got background to the news and sport and business and Sea Watch, travel updates, and the newsmakers in person this evening. Assisted Dying Bill's second reading today. Windfarm site not on heathland, hoping to move to a balanced budget, says the Treasury Minister. Call for a resignation over the TT merchandise debts. And it is Hopjane, so look out for Ginny the Witch tonight.
Man Benham for all your business and legal needs.
First of all, at 29 minutes ahead of 6 o'clock, the Update News headlines. Fastamai, Lewis Foster.
Fastamai. A debate on proposed assisted dying laws has continued throughout the afternoon. Ramsey MHK, Dr. Alex Owenson's assisted dying bill is being given its second reading in the House of Keys today. A number of MHKs have stood to give their view, some giving support for the legislation, whilst also voicing concerns about certain areas. Employment laws, including shared parental leave, have to reflect modern society on the Isle of Man. That's the view of Enterprise Minister Tim Johnston, as a bill addressing a number of labour issues is also progressing through the House of Keys. The Employment Amendment Bill 2023 updates legislation on family leave, whistleblowing and 0 hours contracts. And low-value coins will remain in circulation, and a system of rounding cash transactions is not being pursued further by government, after views were taken during a recent consultation. However, Treasury says it won't continue minting 1 and 2 pence pieces due to the cost of production and storage. In the international news, the director of a hospital in northern Gaza says hundreds of people have been injured and killed in a blast at a refugee camp. The Hamas-run Interior Ministry has blamed an Israeli airstrike on the Jabalia camp, but those claims are not independently verified. Boris Johnson's former top aide has told the COVID inquiry that vulnerable groups were appallingly neglected as the pandemic took hold. Dominic Cummings had to apologise for calling ministers morons, but says the UK government was dysfunctional and that it was insane that senior officials went on holiday. And Saudi Arabia has been all but confirmed as the host of the 2034 World Cup. It's the only remaining bidder after Australia pulled out. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with the news at 6 o'clock.
Man Benham. Contact us by phone, video call, email or face-to-face. We're happy to connect with you. Manx Radio Weather with Manx Glass and Glazing.
Goromaya, thank you, Lewis, from the Ronaldsway Met Office. There is still a strong wind warning in the North Irish Sea. State of sea moderate or rough later tonight. And the weather, cloudy this evening. The rain will return on a fresh to strong easterly. Lowest temperature 9 Celsius for Wednesday. Ukraine, a wet start tomorrow, clearing up to sunshine and showers in a strong southeasterly, veering southwesterly as the rain clears. They're up to 14 Celsius tomorrow. Overnight minimum is 8. And for Jardine, Thursday, rain at times in a strong northerly, high temperature 12 Celsius. Sunset was about 3/4 of an hour ago. Low water 7:05 tonight. High tide 1 a.m. Sunrise 18 minutes past 7 tomorrow morning. And low water 28 minutes past 7. The matrix signs at Hilbury, the Garrow, Solby and Albert Road heading to the mountain, showing fog on the mountain road.
Manx Glass and Glazing are proud to be an approved contractor with Construction Isle of Man. Call the team on 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
And there is a yellow weather warning in operation for the eastern promenades in Laxey, Ramsey and Douglas, and a yellow weather warning for heavy rain, particularly over high grounds. Just a quick word, there is an emergency closure in the north of the Isle of Man. The Bairnaharra Road is closed in Lazaire from Glenduff to Ellenben crossing on the old railway line. There is a deep flooding reported by the Department of Infrastructure in Lazaire tonight. Access to properties has been maintained. Crowds of people have been been making their voices heard about the assisted dying bill outside the House of Keys as it was having its second hearing. Amy Griffiths was there with a Manx Radio microphone.
It would only be a couple of people every year who would be likely to have an assisted death on the Isle of Man, but it would actually make these conversations so much more open and transparent about how people want to die. And that's really important. When somebody's diagnosed with a terminal illness, then what they don't want to be is spending their last few months and days worried about how they will die. I understand that some people fundamentally feel that you shouldn't be able to accelerate your death. And for them we say, don't use it. There will be a conscience clause embedded in all legislation so that doctors who feel strongly about this do not need to take part. But please don't block the right of dying people who do want to have this option.
My name's Paul, I live in Douglas. I think the bill will have serious unintended consequences. I think it will wreck the suicide prevention strategy, and I think that determined lobby groups will use equalities and human rights legislation to widen its extent far, far beyond the people that the proposers of the bill are actually trying to help.
There are stringent safeguarding measures in place.
That's exactly what they said in the other countries where these bills were introduced. And in every single one of them, the scope got widened by the courts, first to include people with chronic pain, and subsequently, typically, to include people with mental illness and suicidal tendencies, exactly the people who the suicide prevention strategy is trying to help. I have massive sympathy for the people this bill is trying to help, but I think the collateral harm that it will cause is far worse than the situation that it's trying to remedy.
The chair of Manx Utilities has confirmed the proposed wind farm at Eristane and Scart is not on heathland. Tim Crookall, MHK, told the House of Keys today the authorities using definitions from the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture to make this determination.
I remind him of the answer provided by the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture on the 22nd of September, which details why Eristane Plantation is not and cannot be classified as heathland. There is therefore no possibility of reclassifying Eristane and Skird as heathland. To explain further, heath refers to a type of open, uncultivated land with low-growing vegetation, often dominated by shrubs such as heather and gorse. Heathland specifically refers to a type of heath that is characterised by acidic soils and a unique assemblage of plants and animal species. This is an important distinction because it is specifically heathland habitat that is prudent to avoid when reviewing sites suitable for onshore wind development. Studies have also been undertaken to identify the proportion of heath present at the site, which is limited to very small patches in fringes and clearings. Additionally, surveys are currently being undertaken within the environmental impact assessment, which will look to mitigate impacts to the environment where practicable. None of the proposed wind turbine locations at Eristane and Skird intersect heath at the plantation. The definitions are given by DEFRA and others experts on this matter, and we will abide by those.
Update brought to you by Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com or call 690 300.
Fast am I, 22 minutes before 6 this Tuesday evening. It's hoped new tax laws will help Treasury move away from drawing down from reserves and get back to a balanced budget, so says Alex Allenson, MHK, the Treasury Minister. He's been discussing the Income Tax Number 2 bill.
Looking at the way we raise revenue, particularly through taxation, is one of these ways of delivering a balanced budget within the medium-term financial plan over the next 3 to 5 years. That's obviously become more of a challenge because of the high inflation costs we've seen this year, but Treasury is still committed to, whilst we'll need to draw down on reserves in the short term to fund our public services, to actually look far more longer term to getting back onto a balanced budget.
Going back to the purpose of this bill, I mean, you've put an order through, and the reason that you put the order through, of course, is because moving a bill through Keys and Legco takes some considerable time, certainly longer than it would take to quickly implement provisions that are announced in the actual budget. So effectively, the order is there to allow a swift introduction of something, and then the bill carries on afterwards to cement that in the Manx law.
That's absolutely right, but also it gives the opportunity for members, although they voted voted on the budget, and it all seems like a good idea at the time, to have that time for extra scrutiny. So, for instance, when we're looking at taxation, and some of the conversations we're having are about some of the unintended consequences of changes in taxation or changes in some of the fees orders, and does it affect different people disproportionately, and does it actually do what it was intended to do? So I hope that by bringing these sort of orders through the legislative process, we can make sure we get that scrutiny both from inside Tynwald but outside as well.
Well, you may call it Samhain, you may call it All Hallows Eve. Of course, on the Isle of Man, we call it Hoptune, the Manx celebration at the end of October that sees in the Celtic New Year. So what makes our festival different to that interloper Halloween? Here's James Franklin from Culture Vannin.
There's one theory that the word Hoptune relates to Hogmanay, which of course anyone from Scotland will know as the celebration of New Year's. And the theory is that in Celtic times, as they say, that this was an important change point in the year, going from the summer half into the winter half. And at this kind of bridge point in what they call the Celtic New Year, then this is a point when the worlds between this side and the other side are at their most thin. And so you are most open to strange things happening. And so a key part of Hoptune traditionally is to protect yourself against evil or against harm, and that would include things like fire, bonfires, and of course today the fire is contained inside your turnip lantern, so that in itself is keeping you safe against evil spirits or people doing harm on you. But then another part is that at this particular point in the year you have a chance to see into the future by doing certain unusual things, and you can predict what will happen in the future.
Sea Watch with the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company.
Motor vessel Manxman departed Heysham at 2:05. She's safely on the link span down below Manx Radio in the harbour. Will be departing this evening at 8:30, arriving in Heysham 15:15 midnight or so, departing at 2:45. Back to Douglas at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning's departure is 8:45, Manxman to Heysham.
Follow the Steam Packet on Twitter for the latest sailing information.
The government's confirmed low-value coins will remain in circulation, and a system of rounding cash transactions is no longer being pursued. The story from Christian Jones.
A public consultation which asked if 1, 2 and 5 pence coins should be withdrawn and a rounding to the nearest 10p system implemented received 1,050 responses. Of those responses, 1,008 were individuals and 41 were organisations, 55% of which were against the proposals and 45% were in favour. Although the coins will remain in circulation, Treasury says it won't continue minting 1 and 2 pence pieces due to the cost of production and storage. The Treasury Minister Alex Allinson says there'll be little effect in the short term, but issues facing charities were raised as a key concern as so many rely on donations of loose change. He's also encouraged charities to modernise their collection strategies and signposted to the Manx Lottery Trust who can offer grants to charities wishing to purchase mobile card readers.
Manx Radio Business Briefing.
At 17 minutes now before 6 in the FTSE, Rolls-Royce was sitting pretty at the top of the FTSE 100 after an upgrade to overweight from equal weight at Barclays, which highlighted a buying opportunity after the shares derated around 10% in the last month. For a full daily market report, go to ramseycrookall.com. Carlsberg's terminated its business in Russia after the Kremlin took control of its operations. The Copenhagen headquartered multinational beer company said it refused to be forced into a deal on unacceptable terms to justify the illegitimate takeover of its Russian business. Carlsberg was in the process of selling its Baltika brewery subsidiary in Russia before management was taken over by the state in July. Chief exec Jakob Arup Anderson said the Russian government's stolen our business in Russia and we're not going to help them make it look legitimate. Since the invasion of Ukraine in February last year, many Western companies have come under pressure to leave Russia and shut down operations. In July of this year, Russia took control of Baltika under an order signed by President Putin. Moscow introduced rules earlier this year allowing it to seize the assets of firms from, quote, unfriendly countries.
The Stock Market Report, brought to you by Ramsey Crookall.
UK equities saw early gains disappear. European markets rode positive momentum. US stocks dipped in early trading. The Fed tomorrow is expected to hold interest rates at a 22-year high of between 5.2 to 5 and 5.5%. In Asia-Pacific markets, Japanese stocks ended higher. The numbers from Ramsey Crookall. At the close in London, the FTSE 100 down almost 0.2% at 7,315. The DAX in Frankfurt up almost 0.5% at 14,783. A short time ago in New York City, the Dow Jones Industrial is down just over 0.1%, 32,883. The Nasdaq Tech Stocks Index down just over 0.2%, 12,761. The S&P 500 in Chicago is flat at 4,166. In the exchange markets, the British pound sterling trading at $1 21.3 cents, €1 14.8 cents, and 22 South African rand 76.8 cents. In commodities, gold's down 0.2% at $1,991 per troy ounce, and a barrel of Brent crude down 0.1% at $86.44.
You've got an investment plan?
Yeah, Mike set it up.
But don't you need loads of money to do that?
Not this one. It's called Shearwater from Ramsey Crookall, and you pay in monthly as little as £100. So it's like saving regularly, really helping us invest in the future. For a house, or the kids' education.
£100 a month? I could easily do that.
You should. The sooner you start, the better.
Invest in your future with as little as £100 a month. Shearwater from Ramsey Crookall, the island's investment specialist for 75 years. Call 717171 or visit ramseycrookall.com. Licensed and regulated by the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority.
This is the most listened to Isle of Man news source, and Manx Radio's Update is the Isle of Man's most downloaded news podcast.
A backbench MHK is calling on the Enterprise Minister to resign after ties were cut with Cube International. Had been tasked with the production and supply of TT Races merchandise, but owes the government and Manx businesses more than £220,000. In the court, Douglas North member John Wannenberg suggested Tim Johnston should be held accountable. Mr Johnston didn't respond.
Well, they certainly did have a relationship. I would call it an ill-conceived relationship. They were to provide merchandise for TT fans, broadly speaking. And they were appointed recently, last year. They've just done the one TT. And the long and the short and the tall of it is that they've gone out of business and they owe the Isle of Man government £160,000. They owe Isle of Man businesses approximately £65,000. That's not good enough. And I need an explanation from the Minister as to why this has happened.
The Minister was reporting on actions taken by previous ministers. You, though, were going pretty much for the jugular, calling for Tim Johnston to resign as Enterprise Minister. Do you accept that perhaps he's picking up the pieces for decisions taken long before he was in post?
You can use that analogy for just about everything, from the promenade to the sea terminal. We can use that argument, but we're going to learn the lessons, no doubt again. Someone has to be responsible. The buck stops with the Minister, and really, enough is enough. Someone must be accountable.
Were you surprised, bearing in mind the department has stated that they did full due diligence, to then find out what would appear to have been a fairly perilous condition that Cube was actually in?
Am I surprised? Absolutely not. I mean, if the department does due diligence, you would think that they would know that the state of affairs that company is in. And clearly, if they had known the figures which David Ashford quoted, I cannot imagine that they would have been awarded the contract. So I would question the adequate due diligence that was carried out. And that was the question, that was the very first part of my question, to which I didn't receive a suitable answer, I'm afraid.
Manx Radio Sport.
Fast am I, Rob Pritchard?
Fast am I. Good evening. Starting with football, and FC Isle of Man's NWCFL Premier Division clash at Earlham this evening has been postponed. It's due to a waterlogged pitch at the RG3 Digital Stadium. The game had been due to take place at 7:45pm and will be rearranged in due course. This is the second time this particular fixture has been pushed back, after it was called off on its original date of the 19th of September, also due to weather conditions. As a result, FC Isle of Man's next league outing will be away against Lower Breck on Thursday the 9th of November at 8pm. In cycling, Manx resident and former world champion cyclist Ben Swift has signed a new contract with Ineos Grenadiers. Swift, who represented the Isle of Man at the 2022 Commonwealth Games, has put pen to paper on a deal to remain with the UCI World Team squad until 2025. Speaking on the announcement, the 35-year-old says he's really happy to be continuing his pro career with a team that feels like a second family. He's currently operating a senior role in the Ineos Grenadiers rider setup. Some of his most prominent career accolades to date include becoming Britain's first Scratch World Champion in 2012 and holding the title of British National Road Race Champion from 2019 to 2022. And in Jiu-Jitsu, Manx club Gracie Barra took its chance to shine on the international stage again as it claimed 2 medals during a major European event last week. Isle of Man competitors Hayley Curtis and Callum Perry represented the Island club at the IBJJF Nogi European Championship in Rome, Italy, across 4 days. Featherweight, Curtis took bronze in both her own division and then again in the absolute category. Meanwhile, Perry, a late addition to the squad replacing the injured Colin Everton, battled well in his class, losing out only on points. Gracie Barra head coach Conrad Roberts says he's immensely proud of both Curtis and Perry's performances.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Inbound at Rundlesway, the 5:25 Logano from Manchester was cancelled. The 6:10 EasyJet from Liverpool inbound at about 5:26. The 7:30 EasyJet from Gatwick's on time. The 10:08 Loganair from London City is on time. The 5:08 Loganair inbound from Liverpool won't be arriving until 10 o'clock. Remember, that's the returning patient transfer plane. Outbound tonight, Loganair Liverpool 6 o'clock. Well, that's the core of the problem. Won't be leaving until 8:15 tonight. The 6:40 EasyJet to Liverpool is on time. The 8:10 EasyJet back to London Gatwick on time. Newcastle Town Road still closed between Spring Valley Roundabout and the bottom of Richmond Hill. Closure of a section of Bretney Close continues in Jerby for construction work. There are temporary lights in Port St Mary at the junction of Queen's Road and Park Road for gas main work. Queen Street, Castletown's closed for resurfacing work. Temporary lights on Peveril Road, Peel for resurfacing, and also Hillside Avenue's closed through to Circular Road in Douglas for adjacent office window replacement. Temporary lights on Glen Crutchery Road, Douglas at the roundabout with Victoria Road for resurfacing. Old Laxey Hill is closed for excavation work, and remember that emergency closure. Benahara Road in Lazaire is closed from Glen Duff to Elm Vane Crossing because of deep flooding reported by the DOI. There is access to properties situated.
H&Hmotorcycles.im for all your motorcycle requirements. Southgate Industrial Estate, opposite Quayside Tyres. Call 665646.
Following on from the recent bedbug plague in Paris, pest control firms in the UK are seeing a huge surge in bedbug infestations. To date, no evidence of the problem on the Isle of Man, though the possibility of more pests could be inadvertently brought in, and that's a concern. UK pest control company Rentokil's seen a 65% rise in call-outs to deal with bedbug infestations. Here's Simon Richardson.
Bedbugs, of which there are around 90 species worldwide, have always been around, but from being a relatively minor problem often associated, rightly or wrongly, with dubious hygiene, they've evolved into a pesticide-resistant menace that's spreading rapidly in many countries. In the UK, pest control firm Rentokil has reported a 65% rise in infestations. The tiny insects, the size of a grain of rice, can be found on mattresses, clothing, furniture, bed frames, and even behind loose wallpaper. As reported widely, they can cause havoc in the hospitality industry, forcing hotels to close and undertake expensive fumigation measures. So far, there's not been a significant surge in bedbug infestation in the Isle of Man, and there are measures people can take to keep them at bay. Always check hotel beds and never place clothes or suitcases on beds or furniture. Also, wash clothes in hot water and make sure you vacuum empty suitcases. Whilst they enjoy a warm environment, ironically, heat is also their enemy. Scientists have found that heating a room up to 60 Celsius kills the bugs in just an hour. However, this is not recommended given the obvious danger that poses. The best weapon against bed bugs is a strict cleaning and hygiene regime. This includes changing bedclothes at least once a week, clothes washing in hot water, and regular hoovering and cleaning of all surfaces. If you do find yourself with bed bug bites, they usually clear up in about a week. Antihistamines are useful in reducing itchiness.
Update brought to you by Simcox Advocates.
Medical students who are studying off-island could be subject to inequality when it comes to government support, so says Douglas North MHK David Ashford, who's asked when a review on bursaries will be carried out. Health and Social Care Minister Laurie Hooper admits there's a disparity, but says a review of bursaries will coincide with a workforce education summit taking place by the end of this year.
Someone who's studying to be a radiographer, if they're in the UK, they can receive a £5,000 training grant. grant. They can get a £1,000 per year specialist subject payment. They can also claim their travel allowances for their clinical placement. Isle of Man students studying on exactly the same course in the UK have access to none of that. But if they come back to the island to do their placement, they're doing their placement as a radiographer alongside people who are on the nursing course who are receiving heavy subsidies on Ireland. So does the Minister recognise there is potentially an inequality, particularly when we are trying to encourage and recruit people who into those fields such as radiography?
Yes, I would agree with the Honourable Member that there is a disparity in terms of support for students studying in the United Kingdom. That really isn't something the Department of Health and Social Care or Manx Care are responsible for. That is a function of our student awards and bursary system that is administered by the Department of Education, Sport and Culture.
In relation to this, I fully accept it crosses departments, it crosses DHSC and Education. So can I ask the Minister, will he be engaging with the Department of Education, Sport and Culture around this issue? Because if we are going to encourage homegrown students in certain key areas, then there's, in things like radiography, there is never practically going to be an on-Ireland course. So are we actually going to look at those disparities and what we can do to try and assist? Because I know it is putting even existing students off either continuing with their courses or in fact actually going into the courses in the first place.
I would like to reassure the Honourable Member that I have already been engaging with the Department of Education on this particular matter in respect of bursary provision, and I know there is a lot of work ongoing inside the Department and the Workforce and Skills Board in partnership with DFE to try and improve the situation across the piece.
That's it for Update Tonight, compiled from the resources of Manx Radio's News Department. Thanks to newsreader Lewis Foster, producer Amy Griffiths after the news at 6, the Comovers Hop Janae with Siobhan Fletcher, Chris Kinley with Greatest Hits, and another Claire Witch special later.
WINT